Napoleon, to me, is one of the more interesting historical figures ever. Just ever. He is an odd person, a person who seems to be particularly obsessed with winning everything in a way that is very unhealthy. It's very unhealthy to be obsessed with winning as much as Napoleon was interested in winning. And Napoleon is very familiar, I think. We all know Napoleon. He's one of the great generals in the history of history, right? When you talk about great generals, you got to talk about Alexander the Great, right? Got to talk about Charlemagne, and you got to talk about, you know, Attila the Hun. You got to talk about all these historical figures. You got to talk about George Washington, quite frankly. But Napoleon dominated his time period to the point where he was known as the world's conqueror, right? No small title. He earned it every step of the way. And he was very rarely beaten, right? There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of people that could really, on an even playing field, beat Napoleon Bonaparte. But there is one general that Napoleon had a ton of trouble beating, right? We know the Battle of Waterloo as being possibly the defining battle of this general, and the battle that ended Napoleon, right? The Duke of Wellington beat Napoleon. Napoleon could not beat the Duke of Wellington, gave him fits forever. And the Duke of Wellington was so specifically good at beating Napoleon. He was a good general too, but we wouldn't remember him had he not beaten Napoleon. The Duke of Wellington was so good at beating Napoleon that even though Napoleon was known as the world's conqueror, the Duke of Wellington became to be known the conqueror of the world's conqueror, which is a nice title to have if you're going to not have the first one, right? Like that's a nice title. That's a nice spot. And I was watching the baseball standings the other day because I started this season by lamenting the Braves and their existence and everything that's wrong with this team after I picked them to finish the season around 500, and then they promptly began the season doing everything but that. And there wasn't a whole lot of ways to justify it, the poor start, but the Braves have since recovered, and they are second in the NL East. And I don't know before the beginning of the season if anybody had the Braves finishing anywhere above the Mets. I certainly did not. Right? I thought that they were going to be sort of contending with Miami for who was going to be the third, fourth team in this division. But the Braves are really, really, really good at beating the NL East number one team, the Washington Nationals. Like, really good. They're particularly good. And they have owned the Nationals this season, despite the fact that the Nationals have a 50-35 record, winning percentage of 58%. They have arguably the best pitcher in baseball this side of Clayton Kershaw in Max Scherzer. Steven Strasburg is also incredibly good. They've got 5 at this point, 5 All-Stars. Like when we watch the All-Star game, how do we feel about the fact that we are watching the Washington Nationals? Because that's what it feels like, right? Between the 3 starters that they have in the field, they also have Scherzer, they also have Strasburg, and on the bubble, possibly Gio Gonzalez. There could be as many as 6 Nationals in this All-Star game. And I don't think that anybody signed up to watch the Nationals on Monday night. But here we are. Very, very much so. But the Nationals can't beat the Braves. And I don't know why. Like, there doesn't seem to be a really good reason, right? Max Scherzer is slated to pitch tonight, so it's possible that the Nationals finally get one. But it is mind-boggling. But if you are the Braves and you started the season how you started the season, which is horrifically, this has to give you a lot of hope for this rebuild, right? You're only 2 games below 500. You're only 8.5 games back of the Nationals. And again, when you consider the disaster, I think that the highest point that the Nationals were ahead of the Braves were like 12 games ahead of the Braves at one point. You're only 8.5 games back now. And it seems very possible that the Braves could end the season around 500. And a World Series contender, they would have dominated this team for the greater part of the season, right? Because one of the reasons why I thought when the Braves started so poorly that they wouldn't make it back to 500 is that you do have to beat the Mets and you do have to beat the Nationals, right? And as it turns out, the Mets are falling to pieces. This is surprising, of course, because this is a team that we thought, at least I thought, was going to be around contending for a World Series for, I don't know, possibly 3 or 4, maybe 5 years. The way that their team was developed and built, I really liked the pitching that they had with Noah Syndergaard. I thought that was a very formidable baseball team, and they have completely gone off the rails, right? Matt Harvey, the Dark Knight, doesn't look very imposing or scary at all. The Mets have completely fallen to pieces, like just gone off the rails in a way that is surprising at best and inexplicable at worst. So yeah, you're getting some wins against the Mets that we all thought were going to be a much better baseball team. But here's the thing. The Nationals are everything we thought that they would be, and the Braves still beat them. Now, there are some weaknesses with the Nationals. The Nationals are not a perfect baseball team by any stretch of the imagination. They've got very dominant starting pitching. They can hit. Daniel Murphy's having an amazing second season following the season that he had last year, where it felt kind of like a gamble that the Nationals went and paid Daniel Murphy a lot of money after Daniel Murphy had one good postseason with the Mets. Okay, he didn't have a great season with the Mets. He had a great postseason with the Mets. The Nationals went and signed him off at that. And oh, look, Daniel Murphy's actually a really good baseball player. Who could have guessed that? Who could have figured that? They can hit. Bryce Harper having an amazing year as well. They're getting a lot of production out of Trey Turner. And there's a lot to like about the Nationals, except they somehow still can't beat the Braves. Right? And it just reminds me of Napoleon and the Duke of Wellington a ton, because Napoleon, great general, had some weaknesses though, right? Like Napoleon refused, if I may get into the weeds a little bit here, Napoleon refused to use reverse slopes. And what reverse slopes are is when two armies met in old battles, they would usually meet on a hill somewhere, and when you were using an army or using a cannon to try and hit the opposing army, if they wanted to, they could use reverse slopes, and they could hide behind the hill so that the cannonball wouldn't, hit the army head on and just wreck the entire battlefield. Right? The Duke of Wellington was great at using reverse slopes. He was great at just hiding behind hills. Napoleon refused. Napoleon thought that was cowardly and would keep his army up on a hill where they would be decimated by cannonballs, right? And he never fixed this. This was an issue that he had his entire fighting career. The rise of popularity of reverse slopes, he never adapted to that. And that was a reason, not the reason, but one decently important reason that he lost at Waterloo. Now, you take this analogy to the Nationals and the Braves. What is the weakness of the Washington Nationals? It's their bullpen. Their bullpen might be the worst bullpen I've ever seen in baseball since I've been watching baseball. So I was 10 when I started watching baseball. So 17 years might be the worst bullpen I've ever seen in 17 years. It's incredible. Not that I was keeping track of the quality of bullpens when I was 10. I'm just saying this is noteworthy in how terrible it is. Right? It is bad. And they have not fixed it. And it's been a problem all season long. This is not a new problem where suddenly it looks like the Nationals don't have a bullpen. The Nationals had a game that Max Scherzer would have had a one-hitter game. And somewhere between the 7th inning and the end of the game, the Nationals went from leading 2-1 or 3-1, and they lost because they gave up 5 runs before the end of the game. This is a problem that they've had, and it's been a bad problem. Doesn't matter how dominant your starters are if you have terrible relief pitching. And the Nationals know their bullpen is bad. And to be fair, they can try and do this before the trade deadline. They can try and fix it before the trade deadline. I don't know who they'd go out and get necessarily, and what it would cost them. But they have to do something about this because you can't be a contender with no bullpen. You will never win. It's a glaring weakness. And I know that a lot of these deals get done right at the trade deadline. I'm just saying, if this is a problem that you've noted that you have, the faster you fix this, the better. I can't imagine that they don't do something about that. But until that time comes, the Braves are going to eat their lunch. Right? Like, they're hitting well enough. And I'm surprised. Right? I am surprised at how well Freddie Freeman's been. Dude's trying to play first base now. It's pretty crazy. But they've been hitting a whole lot better. Right? So it's going to be Scherzer and Dickey. Tonight, the Nationals are the best team in the NL East. And the Braves own the best team in the NL East. Collect with Keon Rose on AM 1240 and 92.7 FM. So nobody in life gets anywhere by themselves. That is an absolute fact. Talk to any successful person from Bill Gates to Warren Buffett, and they're all going to tell you the same thing. None of us got anywhere by ourselves, right? You need help. You need support. You need somebody to teach you lessons in life that hopefully make you a better, stronger version of yourself, and hopefully a successful version of yourself. And there's a story that came up with Peyton Manning and Bruce Arians today that I thought was a very, very interesting story that some of you Peyton Manning fans might enjoy, which is that, Cardinals coach Bruce Arians, known as a quarterback whisperer of sorts, by the way, he's a guy that should have gotten a head coaching job much sooner in his career than he did. He finally got one with the Cardinals, and he's still there. But to me, he's such a good coach, and he's so good with quarterbacks. He revived Carson Palmer's career. If I'm Bruce Arians, I don't necessarily have to worry too badly. If I can get a decent, competent quarterback, I feel like I can win a lot of football games. And certainly he did that. And I believe that he is very, very profoundly fundamental in the development of Andrew Luck. But he was also profoundly fundamental in the development of one Peyton Manning. And there was a story that came out that I think is an incredibly interesting story. This is according to Pro Football Talk on NBC Sports. It says, during a 1998 game against the Patriots in only the second start of Manning's career, the Colts trailed badly. Midway through the fourth quarter of the game, with the outcome already decided, Peyton was so frustrated that he asked for mercy. He wanted to be pulled from the game. Bruce Arians refused. He said, bleep no, get back in there. We'll go no huddle and maybe you'll learn something. You can never ask to come out. You're our leader. Act like it. Right? And Bruce Arians then describes what happened next as a, quote, sight to behold, with Manning leading a late drive that ended in a touchdown pass. Arians saw the drive give Manning a shot of confidence. The next year, as Manning tried to break an 0-3 streak against the pre-Belichick Patriots in those days, the Colts and the Patriots were both in the AFC East at the time. Arians noticed before the game that Manning had a frowning, contorted face. He looked like he really needed to go to the bathroom. Arians continued to insist that Manning was uptight about facing New England again, so Arians said to him, Peyton, your footwork is all messed up. What's wrong with you, man? Arians says that Manning's footwork was actually fine, but the process of focusing on working on his footwork after Arians called him out gave Manning something to distract him, and Manning's anxiety disappeared. So, I mean, Bruce Arians fundamentally coaching Peyton Manning right there. Peyton Manning, as we've been able to know him later in his career, Peyton Manning's known as what? A control freak. Peyton Manning is a guy that wants to know what's happening everywhere. He calls out the video board guy in Denver. He breaks the single season touchdown passing record, and there's a dance that goes on, or not even a dance. It was just his receivers took the ball and they played keep away from him, and it was a fun, charming moment that Peyton Manning choreographed because he would rather be prepared. He would rather be prepared for a celebration of a thing than not be prepared for it. Right? And then maybe Peyton Manning was always that way. But sometimes it's the people that you meet along the way that give you these little behaviors and these little ticks. And I am certain that Peyton is a guy that's always prepared. But when it comes to leadership ability and leadership quality, that's something that you have to learn. You do. I mean, there are guys, we talk about them. They're young. They come into the league. Oh, this guy's ready to be a leader right away. No one is ready to be a leader right away. Now, you might be thrust into the circumstances. You might be forced in there. And look, you'll have to learn on the fly. But no one is ready to be a leader right away. And if some guy is coming into a locker room, they're going to need leaders. I think the NFL and football in general are uniquely different. It's a uniquely different sport than other sports because the quarterback is inherently the leader. You don't have a choice, and it doesn't matter if your quarterback is 37 or 25. He is the leader by default, the guy that's giving everybody the plays, the guy that's supposed to be recognizing the defense, making checks and calls at the lines, making sure that everybody's lined up correctly. You have to have some kind of leadership quality out there. And as you go, the rest of your team goes. And I think Bruce Arians did at least play some part in teaching Peyton Manning how to be a leader. And it's a testament to how good he is as a coach. But that maybe we don't get the Peyton Manning career that we got without Bruce Arians. Because the adversity for Peyton Manning, if we're going to be completely honest, was not there until he was a rookie in the NFL. And then he had to learn how to deal with all the adversity at once. And I think if you don't have good people in the right positions early on, when you first have to learn how to deal with adversity, you can't do it. And I think that we've had a lot of quarterback busts, a lot of not even quarterback busts, just busts in general. A bunch of guys in the NFL and the NBA and Major League Baseball wash out because they are expected to be something that, quite frankly, they are not. They're expected to be a leader. They're expected to know how to handle adversity. And maybe they never learned how to do that before without the right coach in place to teach them that, right? Like I always think about Vince Young, right? Like Vince Young just got waived from the Rough Riders, the team that he went to go try and play Canadian football for. And I think Vince Young didn't really know how to deal with adversity. He didn't. And we say that like that's a character flaw. But when you're 23, 24 years old, that's just life. And Jeff Fisher didn't help him. Like you just have examples where you're a young person, you don't know how to deal with adversity, and if you don't have the person there to help you, it can wind up being pretty awful for you. If you're a young person that's trying to make it in an industry or in a business, you've got to have a mentor, you've got to have some kind of teacher that's willing to sit you down, tell you the truth, tell you when you're going wrong, and you've got to listen to that person. Clutch with Keon Rose on AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM's news now.
Police in Walker County say a man saw his car being stolen on West Highway 193 in Kensington and did what the police say you're never supposed to do. He gave chase and chased the car all the way from Walker County to St. Elmo. A red Kia Optima joined in and began shooting at the victim with .45 caliber bullets whizzing by. It crashed in St. Elmo. The occupants escaped on foot and the F-150 sped away. The carjacking victim was not hit by any of the bullets. After 2 bodies were dumped in a cemetery in Chattanooga, 2 arrests have been made. William Howard Wright and an unnamed juvenile have both been arrested. The police say they believe they know what the motive for the killing was. A video was posted on Facebook of the victims flashing cash, and the bodies were found with their pockets emptied. New details coming out about a man who was arrested back in May, accused of having a bomb in his backpack. Joshua Redmond Biden reportedly admitted to having a bomb in his backpack. He claimed he needed it to defend himself against the street gang MS-13. Russell Stroud, Nooga Radio News, now.
In-depth traffic, news, and information. Mornings on Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
Expect fair skies through your nighttime hours. Still on the warm side, lows by morning 70 to 72. First Saturday, may see a quick passing shower or thunder shower for the early afternoon, but not bad. Highs into the upper 80s with more sunshine, dry, and pleasant weather returning Sunday. McBriar Realty is now Real Living Southern Realty, serving the entire tri-state area. Find your dream home now with Real Living Southern Realty. For their complete listings and more, rlsouthernrealty.com. And I'm Swarm Team 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Orr on Nooga Radio AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
Hi, this is Eric Pelton. Taxes, accounting, business advice. I've got a neat brochure, 12 ways to improve your business profits. Come on by for a free consultation and we'll give you a copy. EJ Pelton Company, 332-3339.
I have the best steak selection in town. Name of the business is Don's Meat Shop, and I'm Donnie Raines. Just ask for Donnie. I make over 20 different types of sausages. Most of them are great for grilling. We have the best selection, best quality. We have the hard-to-find items. Don's Meat Shop.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
I'm blowing everything up. We're starting over. I'm doing a new show. I want guys who push it to the middle of the table and go over the top. Take a risk, fail miserably. I'm right, and I'm not wrong, and I'll never back down. Conflict works. Allow it.
It's The Herd with Colin Cowherd. Right here and everywhere. Noon Eastern.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
You're listening to AM 1240 and 92.7 FM, Clutch with Keon Rose. I have a thought to get into about free agency, but not the NBA variety. I think I've beaten that to death over the last week. I have covered every important free agency thing that there is to cover. I even talked to you about the Kings yesterday. The Kings. Who on earth cares about the Sacramento Kings? Outside of Sacramento, obviously. But seriously, what on earth is CNN doing? That is insane to me. We talked a little bit about it on our show, Two Millennials Talk, that happens every Thursday at 8 o'clock. You should listen to it. It's funny. It's me and our news director, Russell Stroud, not talking sports, which is what I usually do, and not really giving you the news, which is what he usually does, and just really relaxed, a really relaxed show. And we yesterday, I say we, but really it was my vendetta to just go out there and beat CNN to death because I don't understand what it was that they were doing with this guy that he posted a GIF on Reddit of Donald Trump beating Vince McMahon up in a WWE wrestling match about 10 years ago. And then the face of Vince McMahon was actually covered up by the CNN logo, which I imagine Donald Trump thought was funny because that's the kind of thing I imagine he does think is funny. And he tweeted it. And the guy that made the GIF got in a ton of trouble with CNN. That's right, CNN. One of the most powerful news organizations on earth decided to take it upon themselves to police what is right and wrong with just a guy on the internet. And then proceeded to blackmail him and then say that they didn't blackmail him. Right? Now, they could say that they didn't blackmail him. They backed up on that. But here's the quote, though, from CNN. CNN is not publishing Han A-Hole Solo's name, that's his username on Reddit, because he is a private citizen who has issued an extensive statement of apology, showed his remorse by saying he has taken down all of his offending posts, and because he said he's not going to repeat this ugly behavior on social media again. In addition, he said his statement could serve as an example to others not to do the same. CNN reserves the right not to publish his identity should any of that change. Sounds like a threat. That sounds like blackmail. And I don't like that. I don't like the idea that a news organization is going to take it upon themselves to enforce morality. That is not the goal of the news. That is not the purpose of the news. The purpose of the news is to report the news. Nothing more, nothing less. That's crazy to me. Like, I can't imagine if somebody tweeted something about LeBron James that may even be offensive, racially charged, or whatever, and then ESPN or Fox Sports 1 took it upon themselves to expose the identity of this guy. That's not how the news works. I mean, now, if someone were to expose his identity and they reported it, well, that would be different, but it isn't. They investigated it and started to find out his identity, and then he apologized so they wouldn't. That is insane. It's insane. It boggles my mind. I will never understand how on any universe that's actually an okay set of behaviors for a news organization. I will never get it. I remember going to J school, good old journalism school that took me way too long to complete because I'm lazy. I remember doing all of that. And I had many teachers, and I think I had some of the best journalism teachers a person could have, that would tell me that the goal of the news is to report the news. You never become the story, you just report the story, right? National Geographic, I think, does this better than anybody else. National Geographic is notorious for watching terrible things happen to animals, and they just record it, right? Like, they'll see a lion just tearing a gazelle to pieces. And sure, they could go in and help the gazelle because that's what you want to feel. Even when they make the documentaries, it almost feels like in the story, the gazelle is the good guy, because how could the animal being eaten not be the good guy? And the tragedy happens is that the lion comes and gets him. But the lion is just doing what the lion does, and the gazelle's just doing what the gazelle does. They don't mess with it. They don't interfere. They don't try and save any animals. If something bad is going to happen, they let it happen. They let it happen. And I just think that is tantamount that every news organization, this news organization and others, don't try to influence a story. Don't try and influence a narrative. And certainly don't try and become the soldiers of justice. Don't try and go out there and make some kind of statement by policing morality. You're not an organization that does that. You're the news. You're the news. And I think that you should have to make several moral decisions as a news organization, sports or otherwise. There are certain moral decisions that you'll have to make. When you report a story, you could put the lives of people in danger, right? Like, I mean, news organizations have this all the time, where if you report a story incorrectly, you could put the lives of soldiers and operatives in danger. You could tell the American people something that's absolutely reckless. And that's not okay. It's not all right. But I think at the same time, you have to figure out, okay, what's in the best interest of the American people to know and what isn't. And tracking down some guy on the internet that made a GIF because you got your feelings hurt is insanity. It's absolute madness. And if I saw that happen in a news organization that reported sports, I would be offended to the highest level. I'm already offended right now. Like, what on earth were they thinking? Not to get too political, but just like, imagine. Because if somebody said something about LeBron James, right? Like, so LeBron James, before the playoffs started, someone spray painted, if you recall, the N-word onto the side of his house, his LA house. Like, what if ESPN tracked down that guy, found out who did it, and threatened to reveal his identity? I would say that they were wrong for doing that. Yeah, I'm offended too, right? I'm offended by the N-word. But that guy's just a guy, right? Now, if CNN wanted to take that information and report him to the police, right? And then after all of that stuff became public, report that would be a different thing. But to track down the guy, make the guy apologize, and then say, well, this is just all in the name of making sure the right thing gets done, that's not your job. It's just not your job. Like, I can't even imagine if that had happened. I would be incredibly upset. That is a breach of an American right, which is your right to privacy, which is sure that protects you and your right to privacy against the government. But it would be nice if you could depend on a news organization to act somewhat ethically without somebody mandating that you do the right thing. I don't know. I just felt like I had to say that. Not to turn the show into a political show, but that bothered me. It really bothered me. Clutch with Keon Rose on AM 1240 and 92.7 FM. Let's get to the sports. Let's get to the goods, what you tune in for. I understand you can get too political and lose your whole audience. Hopefully I didn't do that. But I was thinking about NFL markets, right? Because Deion Sanders had a comment the other day about Phillip Rivers, which is that he thinks that Phillip Rivers should force a trade to the Denver Broncos. I think it would be good for the Denver Broncos as well if they could somehow get their hands on Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers is coming, I think, to the end of his prime as an NFL quarterback. And Phillip Rivers has had a delightful prime. I enjoy watching the Chargers every week, even though maddeningly the Chargers will be like 4 points behind in every game that you seem to be watching on CBS. And then it looks like they might score. They'll fail to score 60 minutes, the end of your weekend and the end of football. Like that is how it feels to be watching the Chargers every single week. And I don't know why, but the team is not constructed in a win-now fashion. And you could argue throughout Phillip Rivers' entire career, it has never been constructed in that fashion, even though Phillip Rivers himself is an absolutely fantastic quarterback. And as I've watched him, Phillip Rivers is a Hall of Famer, right? Like if you just look at the numbers, Phillip Rivers is a Hall of Famer. But if you ask somebody, well, should Phillip Rivers be in the Hall of Fame? They might not say yes. And if you asked somebody, should Eli Manning be in the Hall of Fame? They might also be they may say, yeah, Eli should be in the Hall of Fame, right? More people would think that Eli Manning ought to be in the Hall of Fame than Phillip Rivers, even though Phillip Rivers is statistically and actually the better quarterback. Eli has 2 rings as the result of playing with a better, more competent, less cheap organization. And I'm not taking anything away from Eli, right? Like you don't have a control over how your organization is run, but I think it's interesting because Eli did have some control over which organization that he went to because he did not want to go to the Chargers. And in fact, forced it to where he found himself with the Giants. That Eli Manning is considered a Hall of Famer and Phillip Rivers isn't, is almost directly the fault of Eli Manning, right? So if you're Phillip Rivers, why stick with the Chargers? And I'm being dead serious right now because you will look at the NBA. The way that the NBA works, a lot of guys sign these really short contracts. They have a lot of mobility. They can go wherever they want. You're Gordon Hayward. You don't want to play in Utah? Be a Celtic. You're Kevin Durant. You don't want to be in Oklahoma City? Go be a Warrior. And it's fine. You're LeBron and you don't want to be in Cleveland? Go to Miami. Don't want to be in Miami? Go back to Cleveland. I love the mobility of the NBA. I think it makes the NBA offseason much more interesting. But the NFL, guys who are like franchise players, especially quarterbacks, and I think this applies mostly to quarterbacks because they're the player that's most likely to generate the star power enough to really be able to control their own destiny. But how come more guys in the NFL don't move around to wherever they want to? How come more guys in the NFL don't look at their organization, see that it is a dumpster fire, and take off? And I understand that part of it is the franchise tag. The franchise tag does necessitate that you kind of have to stick around. But I think if you sign short contracts and then they have to slap you with the franchise tag, it will become at some point unfeasible that a team actually slap you with the franchise tag again. You'll have the Kirk Cousins situation. How come more players, especially quarterbacks, don't sign shorter contracts that allow them the flexibility to leave bad football teams? Because like Andrew Luck is stuck now, right? He's got a very long contract. And the Colts are awful. They're a bad football team. They're poorly designed. They allowed Ryan Grigson to be their GM for longer than Ryan Grigson deserved to be their GM. He was not doing a good job of putting talent around Andrew Luck in any particular perceivable kind of way. And you can make the same argument for Phillip Rivers, that the best teams that Phillip Rivers had were when he first entered the league and he was able to make the playoffs. And then since then, those teams have been terrible, and Phillip Rivers has been phenomenal, and it hasn't mattered, and you haven't noticed. And Deion Sanders was saying that Phillip Rivers needs to pull a Kevin Durant. Just go to where you can win. Join a good team. And it's crazy to me that it doesn't happen in football, because football, it feels like, is the one sport we actually wouldn't blame you for doing that, right? Like basketball, when a bunch of star players lump together, we are absolutely certain that there's a certain level of star power that you are just guaranteed a title. Even if we're wrong, there's a certain level of star power that we believe guarantees you a title. I remember Dwight Howard forced that trade out of Orlando to go to the Lakers and play in Los Angeles. And on that team was going to be Steve Nash, MVP, Kobe Bryant, MVP, Dwight Howard, multiple-time Defensive Player of the Year, and a guy that we certainly thought might have an MVP in his own future, and certainly contended for many MVPs at that point in his career. And what ended up being the actual thing that happened was that team was terrible, but we saw all the stars lumped together and thought, no, that team's going to a finals. And as it turns out, that team was just old. If that team was a younger team, maybe they do all go to the finals. Like maybe if you have younger Nash, who's actually able to play, and a younger Kobe and a less injured Dwight Howard, maybe that team does make some kind of a run. But we assume the star power helps in the NBA in a way that we do not assume that in the NFL, because we see how very often lumping together a bunch of stars on a football team helps nothing. You see it time and time again. That one time that Vince Young called the Philadelphia Eagles the dream team because they had Michael Vick and they had Nnamdi Asomugha, and they still had Shady McCoy on that team, and that team was a loaded football team. And somehow the grand total of the sum of those parts wound up being a whole lot less than what was actually there. So how come players don't move around? Like, we don't blame you when things don't work, and we don't blame players as much in football if a guy joins an already good team. We don't say of an NFL player, boy, he should have stuck it out. He should have looked for the challenge. We say it in the NBA all the time. We never say that of a football player. It would make perfect sense if a wide receiver felt like his team had no quarterback and that his team hasn't particularly made an effort to find him a quarterback and decided he wanted to leave in free agency. You don't blame him, right? If a wide receiver wants to leave for more money, if a wide receiver wants to leave for less money, you don't blame football players the way that you blame basketball players for stuff. How come more basketball players don't move? And I understand that there are a few other factors that I'm completely leaving out, right? Like the average NFL career is much shorter, so you're more likely to just take whatever it is that you're guaranteed. I get that. Your risk of injury in the NFL is also much lower. The fact that some guys cannot play in every system, that a defensive back has a limited amount of systems that he might be able to play in if he is not a true shutdown corner, right? That if you are a guy that plays nickel, you're not going to fit into everybody's scheme or be featured in everybody's scheme. There are different reasons why a player might have fewer options in the NFL than they would in the NBA. But it still doesn't change the fact that a guy like a quarterback, for instance, if a guy is really good enough to command the kind of money that locks you into a long-term contract where you can't go anywhere, then you're probably good enough to have a team rebuild and refocus their entire game scheme around you. That's possible, right? So I don't know why guys don't necessarily move around. In the NFL, you are more likely to just take the money and run. But I think the NFL would actually be better served by guys having greater mobility, right? The rosters are bigger. There's more, the contracts are lower. Like, you can make these things work out a whole lot more easily. It just seems to me that it's weird. And NFL players don't ever push the issue, right? Like every single one of them will get mad at the amount of money that an NBA guy gets. But let's face it, the NBA Players Association has just been whooping the NBA for a little while now. And they, as an NBA player, are more likely to push the issue of winning, that guys will get contract offers and sit back and say, I want to see what this organization does for me. Right? That John Wall can get a contract offer, an extension, the super max that they can offer him, and not sign it in 15 seconds. Why? Because he's looking around and going, I don't want to be stuck on a bad team. I want to make sure this team is good. And we don't see that in the NFL, right? You see Derek Carr. The instant that they offered him a lot of money, he signed it. We don't know that the Raiders are for real, right? Like, what if the Raiders decide, we're not sure we want to try and keep Amari Cooper? But you're Derek Carr. You're not trapped on a team that doesn't have Amari Cooper. And no disrespect to Derek Carr, but one of the reasons why he has had so much success is in large part because of Amari Cooper. Because he's just got one of the most talented receivers in the entire league, right? Like, on a short list of guys that are the best receivers in the league, when you look at Julio Jones and you look at AJ Green, like in your top 10 guys, in your top 8 or 7 guys, you'd have to include Amari Cooper. You absolutely would. There is no football player who's willing to, quote unquote, pull a Kevin Durant, but they absolutely should. Football is a sport where we would allow you to do that morally. Football is a sport where teams are more cutthroat. You're likely to be cut in the middle of your contract anyway. A player being cutthroat to a football team is somehow more palatable than a player being cutthroat to an NBA team. Football is the sport we would allow you to do that in, and it absolutely does not happen. And I like I said, there are a number of reasons why that would be difficult, but it's not impossible. So it's weird that it never, ever happens. Clutch with Keon Rose on AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
Hi, this is Eric Pelton. Taxes, accounting, business advice. I've got a neat brochure, 12 ways to improve your business profits. Come on by for a free consultation and we'll give you a copy. EJ Pelton Company, 332-3339.
This is Thomas DeMoss with Keller Williams Realty. I am a realtor in Chattanooga. We list and sell homes, work with buyers, work with home sellers. I have been involved in real estate for over 10 years. My background is as a real estate investor. That is what I bring to the table, is that real estate investor mindset. My job is to help you sell your house for the most money, employing the best marketing strategy and walking you through what can be a rather stressful process. So we are encouraging people who are on the fence or even thought about selling their house to give us a call. There's no obligation. We're just here to kind of have a conversation, let people know what the process is like, what the market is like, what values they can expect to receive. We work with buyers as well. I also have a buyer's agent that works exclusively with my buyers because we want to give our clients as much attention as we can. My cell phone number is 423-364-0028. Our website is northriverpropertygroup.com. That's northriverpropertygroup.com. We'd love for you guys to call us.
I've been a customer at SNS 14 years. It's way out of my way, but I'm well treated. I believe what I'm told. Price is reasonable. David Tool is here. Make an SNS appointment today. This week, get $50 off any 30,000-mile service or timing belt repair. And get a free combat knife as a gift. SNS Auto Repair specializes in Toyota, Lexus, Honda, Acura, Scion, Nissan, and Infiniti. 6-time winner of Best of the Best award in the Times Free Press. 855-3436. ssautorepair.net. 855-3436.
And now to our reporter in the field.
We asked Ray at Ray's Plumbing what's important for homeowners to know.
Some field line systems can cost upwards of $10,000. The bottom line is to save yourself money down the road. I would definitely recommend everybody with a septic that is not on county or city sewer to have an inspection done by a qualified professional. It'd be great if nobody did inspections on them for all plumbing companies. That's what we do to make a living. Not to scare anyone, but it should be in the back of your mind. The danger is the field lines failing and costing thousands upon thousands of dollars and tearing your yard up. By preventative maintenance, you're saving yourself a large headache that may displace yourself and your family. That happens more often than you think. The waste is designed to stay in the tank, and that waste will build up over time. Even with treatment, we have to help that waste break down. Ultimately, preventative maintenance is the key that will keep you from spending $5,000 to $10,000 on replacing your septic system. The bottom line is to save yourself money down the road.
Call Ray at Ray's Plumbing, 421-6341, 421-6341.
Are you looking for a gospel-oriented, covenantal, family-friendly Reformed church? Dayton Reformed Presbyterian Church is a body of Christ-centered believers gathering for worship on the Lord's Day from around southeastern Tennessee. Our congregation is reformational in its outlook. It has a traditional worship service regulated by the Word of God. Prayer, singing the Psalms, reading God's holy Word, teaching, preaching the Bible, the administration of the sacrament. Dayton Reformed Pres, committed to the authority of the Bible as the inerrant, infallible Word of God. As Westminster Confession of Faith directs every Christian, we aim to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. As a Reformed church, our purpose is teaching and preaching the gospel, making and training disciples of Jesus Christ, taking dominion for our Lord's sake by applying God's holy and perfect law to every area of life. We would be honored to have you join us for worship. Dayton Reformed Presbyterian. This Sunday morning at 11 at Dayton Community Chapel, 184 Mulberry Avenue, Dayton. Click DaytonRPC.org. Click DaytonRPC.org. 184 Mulberry Avenue, Dayton.
My name is Trevor Ashley. I'm an attorney here with the law firm McCoon, Williams, Ashley, and Stanley. We have a show on Nougat Radio called Legal Bites, where we discuss legal topics of interest to our listeners: estate planning, business formation, and business transactions. Legal Bites, 11 a.m. on Wednesday.
Nougat Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM knows your opinion is important. So call 800-8949. Agree or disagree. Call 423-800-8949. 800-8949. Nougat Radio, AM 1240, 92.7 FM, and 95.3 HD4. News, talk, sports. Nougat Radio.
It is Eric Jones hard into the outside wall, and they are still 3 and 4 wide. It looks like we're racing at Talladega.
Caution flag is out. It looked like Denny Hamlin was trying to get by Ricky Stenhouse. Got into the back of Ricky at the line. Man, that's a close one. Matt Kenseth wins stage 1.
Green checkered flag is out, and Brad Keselowski has won stage 2.
Dale Earnhardt Jr. into the wall. That will bring out the caution. Caution waving once again. And again, it's Dale Earnhardt Jr. involved.
Oh, trouble. Ty Dillon has gotten turned to the inside of the racetrack, and Clint Boyer has just nailed him.
Matt Kenseth falling back, the field storming by. Something wrong. Now we see sparks from Kenseth's Toyota.
Larson chucks him off. Coming off turn number 2. Nose to tail. Now it's Logano to the high side in 3.
Joey Logano, a winner here at the Richmond International Raceway, here at
live on Chattanooga's official NASCAR radio station.
Nougat Radio, AM 1240, 92.7 FM.
The voice of NASCAR.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nougat Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM. Chattanooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM's news now.
Police in Walker County say a man saw his car being stolen on West Highway 193 in Kensington and did what the police say you're never supposed to do. He gave chase and chased the car all the way from Walker County to St. Elmo. A red Kia Optima joined in and began shooting at the victim with .45 caliber bullets whizzing by. It crashed in St. Elmo. The occupants escaped on foot and the F-150 sped away. The carjacking victim was not hit by any of the bullets. After 2 bodies were dumped in a cemetery in Chattanooga, 2 arrests have been made. William Howard Wright and an unnamed juvenile have both been arrested. The police say they believe they know what the motive for the killing was. A video was posted on Facebook of the victims flashing cash, and the bodies were found with their pockets emptied. New details coming out about a man who was arrested back in May, accused of having a bomb in his backpack.
WBLZ HD4 Ottawa, W224AZ Chattanooga, WSDT Sunny Daisy Chattanooga.
Face to face at the G20 summit. And about that election interference,
the president brought up the meddling at the very start of his meeting with Vladimir Putin.
The 2 leaders have a deal for a Syrian ceasefire.
This is our first indication of the U.S. and Russia being able to work together in Syria.
This is the CBS World News Roundup Late Edition. I'm Dave Barrett. Past the obligatory photo op, it was supposed to be a half-hour meeting between the American and Russian presidents, but it lasted for nearly 2.5 hours at the G20 summit in Germany. White House correspondent Stephen Portnoy says Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin went right to the issue of election interference.
The Secretary of State says the president brought up the meddling at the very start of his meeting with Vladimir Putin.
The president pressed President Putin on more than one occasion regarding Russian involvement. President Putin denied such involvement.
Tillerson described Putin's position on election meddling as intractable.
So the question is, what do we do now?
The U.S. and Russia have announced agreement on a ceasefire in Syria.
Political analyst Leonard Steinhorn.
President Trump has been clear he doesn't see a future for Assad in Syria. I'm not so sure Putin will agree with him on that, but at this point, we're dealing with baby steps.
Also at the G20 summit in Germany, Donald Trump and Mexico's Enrique Peña Nieto had a discussion. Correspondent Margaret Brennan.
Mexico announced that talks to begin renegotiating NAFTA will start next month. That's the free trade deal that President Trump has called unfair. But the news is that the meeting happened at all because Peña Nieto had called off a prior White House visit after President Trump insisted that Mexico pay for his proposed border wall. Asked today about it, Trump said that is absolutely still the plan.
On the streets of Hamburg, more confrontations today. Cars were set on fire, store windows smashed, flares were fired at helicopters, the Canadian delegation's tires were slashed. There's been looting and hundreds of arrests and injuries. Still, nothing stopped leaders from going to a concert. Featuring Beethoven's Ninth and a big dinner after that. Stateside, who's trying to hack U.S. nuclear power plants?
The Russians have done similar things in the past. It looks like what they did in the Ukraine. So we don't know for sure, but it looks like it was Russia.
Cyber consultant Jim Lewis works with the U.S. government when focusing on Kansas's Wolf Creek nuclear plant.
They probably want to get into the nuclear controls, but they weren't able to. They only were able to get into the front-end operations, the billing, the office stuff, the email.
Nuclear plant safety systems are not connected to the internet. The Dow gained 94 today. Now this.
With Quicken Loans, the outdated and complicated mortgage process is a thing of the past. Our simple process helps you understand all the details so you can be confident that you're getting the right mortgage. Take your mortgage to the next level and call 800-QUICKEN or go completely online with Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. No matter how you prefer to work with us, we've got what you need to get you through the mortgage process with ease. For 7 years in a row now, J.D. Power has ranked Quicken Loans highest in the nation in customer satisfaction for primary mortgage origination. And for the 3rd year in a row, they also ranked us highest in the nation for mortgage servicing. Whether you're looking to purchase or refinance, now is the time. The rate today on a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage is 3.875%, APR 4.23%. Call 800-QUICKEN or get started online at rocketmortgage.com. Apply simply, understand fully, mortgage confidently.
For J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com. Call for cost information and conditions. Equal housing lender. Licensed in all 50 states. NMLSConsumerAccess.org, number 3030.
Late word from CBS's David Martin at the Pentagon. This month, the U.S. will test the THAAD system in Kodiak, Alaska. A target will be detected, tracked, and engaged by this high-altitude defense system that could protect against a ballistic missile, such as the one that was launched by North Korea. Lots of jobs opened up last month at food services and drinking establishments. 220,000 jobs created in June, better than expected. National unemployment rate rose to 4.4% as more Americans entered the workforce. But there are others, says CBS's Sam Litzinger, who are out of a job.
The Department of Veterans Affairs says more than 500 agency officials have been fired for misconduct since President Trump took office. The actions affect positions ranging from a tractor operator to VA attorneys. Mr. Trump had signed into law a measure he said would make it easier for the VA secretary to discipline employees who fail our veterans.
You are listening to the
News
CBS
and information.
World News
Mornings on Nuga Radio. AM 1240. Chattanooga Radio. AM 1240 and 92.7 FM's news now.
Police in Walker County say a man saw his car being stolen on West Highway 193 in Kensington and did what the police say you're never supposed to do. He gave chase and chased the car all the way from Walker County to St. Elmo. A red Kia Optima joined in and began shooting at the victim with .45 caliber bullets whizzing by. It crashed in St. Elmo. The occupants escaped on foot and the F-150 sped away. The carjacking victim was not hit by any of the bullets. After 2 bodies were dumped in a cemetery in Chattanooga, 2 arrests have been made. William Howard Wright and an unnamed juvenile have both been arrested. The police say they believe they know what the motive for the killing was. A video was posted on Facebook of the victims flashing cash, and the bodies were found with their pockets emptied. New details coming out about a man who was arrested back in May, accused of having a bomb in his backpack. Joshua Redden reportedly admitted to having a bomb in his backpack. He claimed he needed it to defend himself against the street gang MS-13. Russell Stroud, Nuga Radio News, now.
In-depth traffic, news, and information. Mornings on Nuga Radio. AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
Expect fair skies through your nighttime hours. Still on the warm side, lows by morning 70 to 72. First Saturday, may see a quick passing shower or thunder shower for the early afternoon, but not bad. Highs into the upper 80s with more sunshine, dry, and pleasant weather returning Sunday. McBriar Realty is now Real Living Southern Realty, serving the entire tri-state area. Find your dream home now with Real Living Southern Realty. For their complete listings and more, rlsouthernrealty.com. And I'm Swarm Team 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Orr on Nuga Radio AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
He stole out so much cash, such a huge mountain of cash, that he's become a national star. Rick Davis. You know the story. Cash, 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 and more cash. People can't believe it. They want to see it. And now Rick Davis has a new TV show. National TV, USA and Canada. He's got the gold and silver, diamonds and rings. You get dizzy just thinking about it. Rick's selling. Rick's buying. Cash, 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 and more cash. And now a mountain of cash catching the Hollywood spotlight. You know where it is, Brainerd Road. Rick Davis, Gold and Diamonds. Cash, 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 and national TV cash. That's really big. Everyone wants to see it. Money flying out the door. Rick Davis is America's jeweler. It's better than Hollywood. It's right here. Cash, 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 and more cash. Rick Davis, Gold and Diamonds. Brainerd Road.
You love me. You really love me.
Nuga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM knows your opinion is important. So call 800-8949. Agree or disagree. Call 423-800-8949. 800-8949. Nuga Radio, AM 1240, 92.7 FM, and 95.3 HD4. News, talk, sports. Nuga Radio.
Hello, Chattanooga. You're listening to AM 1240, 92.7 FM. The phone number is 423-800-8949. You're listening to Nuga Radio and NugaRadio.com. This is Clutch with Keon Rose. And, you know, if you're a Braves fan, you've got a lot to look forward to. If you're a Hawks fan, probably not so much. But if you're a Braves fan, there's a good amount there to look forward to. And I saw the Braves record, right? Because I did at one point this season give up on the Braves. Like, I just stopped paying attention to them at all. And they are 41-43. And I was trying to figure out how it is that happened. And it happened because they dominate the Nationals, right? Like, they own the Nationals. The Nationals are the best team in the NL East, and the Braves own the best team in the NL East, which I find interesting because it just is a way that you can make a name for yourself. beating the best can help you make a name for yourself, even if you're not necessarily the best, right? People know a lot about, historically, Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon is one of the most dominant generals in the history of history. And he is a guy that is very capable of winning many kinds of battles, many different battles, master strategist. And we know Napoleon as the world's conqueror. That is his title. That is his reputation in history. That Napoleon tried to stretch his reach to much of the known world and did. And he is one of the great generals in world history, right? Like you mentioned him along with guys like Alexander the Great and William Tecumseh Sherman and General Patton. Like you mention his name in those categories because there's a list of guys who are great generals, and he was definitely one of them. But there was another guy who's worth noting, and not for a lot of the battles that he did win throughout his career. I don't think that outside of Waterloo you could name any of them. That would be the Duke of Wellington, who, while Napoleon was known as the world's conqueror, the Duke of Wellington, who Napoleon could not beat for reasons that are very difficult to explain, was known as the conqueror of the world's conqueror. Was able to defeat Napoleon twice, and defeating him in Waterloo ended Napoleon. Right? That's a great title to have if you can have it. The Duke of Wellington. Can most people name a single other battle that he was involved in that didn't have Napoleon in it? No, but it doesn't matter, because what was important is that the Duke of Wellington was not just good at beating Napoleon, he was great at beating Napoleon. I think that's where the Braves are now with the Washington Nationals. The Nationals are, sure, the superior baseball team, and just in terms of talent, when you look at the All-Star game, we are going to be watching the Nationals in the All-Star game. Between Bryce Harper and Daniel Murphy and Steven Strasburg and Max Scherzer, we're going to be watching the Nationals in the All-Star game. The Nationals are at the top of the division, 50-35 record. They're good at home. They're good on the road. They're good against the East. They're good against the West. They do struggle against the Central a little bit, but even then, that's 8-8 over the course of this season. Right? Great baseball team. Contender. World Series contender. But they can't beat the Braves. They can't figure it out. Tonight, R.A. Dickey versus Max Scherzer. And if the Braves were to somehow get the better of the Nationals with Scherzer on the mound, I don't even know at this point, if you're the Nationals, what it is that you do, except throw up your hands and go, what do we do with the Atlanta Braves? Which if you had told me what team would frustrate the Nationals most this season, I would have told you the Mets. Instead, we've got the Braves as the prime antagonist to a baseball team that a lot of people think could make it to a World Series. And a lot of this has to do with a weakness that the Nationals know about and, at least to this point in the season, have refused to fix, right? When you look at Napoleon and the Duke of Wellington, Napoleon, one of his biggest weaknesses was that he refused to use reverse slopes. Reverse slopes just refers to the fact that when you're fighting in a war and the other side has cannonballs and they're firing cannons at you, what you do is you hide your army behind the hill a little bit so that the cannon bounces off the hill and hopefully goes over your army, right? If it does hit you, it's not going to do nearly enough damage to take you out than if you had your army on the hill just eating cannonballs, right? Napoleon refused. Napoleon thought it was cowardly to use reverse slopes. The Duke of Wellington used reverse slopes. Why? It's just a smarter thing to do. The Nationals have a glaring reverse slope weakness. They don't have a bullpen, okay? Relief pitching is a struggle and possibly more accurately described as a nightmare for the Washington Nationals, who have no way of bridging a gap between Max Scherzer, Steven Strasburg, Gio Gonzalez, any of their other good pitchers, and a victory. Like they struggle with this so mightily that has got to be at the top of their wish list coming up to the trade deadline. And despite the fact that the Nationals have known that this is a problem, they have serious hands-on experience that this is a problem for them, that Max Scherzer was about to have a historically great pitching night, and a historically great pitching night for Max Scherzer earlier this season turned into a loss because they had no relievers. Nobody of any quality, nobody of any goodness. I mean, it was awful. It was dreadful. And the Braves just keep taking advantage of them. Again and again and again. And the Braves are hitting much better now. Like, the Nationals have a bullpen problem and to this point have not fixed it. And maybe they're just waiting until the trade deadline, right? Like, when you are 50-35 and you're the top of the division, your sense of urgency, I suppose, is not as strong. I don't feel like the Nationals believe that anybody's going to catch them here. But it just strikes me as odd that you know what your problem is and you haven't tried to fix it. And the Braves don't care. They're just going to keep taking advantage of the Nats. They're just going to keep doing it. Why not? They play again tonight. Max Scherzer is pitching against R.A. Dickey. Can I tell you who's going to win this game? I don't know. I know that Max is going to be dominant. I know that Scherzer is going to be dominant. He's the best pitcher in Major League Baseball this side of Clayton Kershaw. And quite frankly, on some nights, looks better than Kershaw. He looks better than Kershaw, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Because the moment we start to reach the 7th, the 8th, if the Nationals haven't pummeled you at that point, you're still in the ball game. When you think about that, that's kind of crazy. And when you consider that guys like Freddie Freeman, who's come back from injury, trying to play first base and actually hitting pretty well, and Ender is starting to come alive as well. Yeah, I like the Braves' chances to just continue to bother the Nationals all season long. That is until they fix that horrifying hole in their armor, their bullpen. I don't understand it. It makes no sense. But there it is. Clutch with Keon Rose on AM 1240 and 92.7 FM. So there's a report out. Tennessee defensive coordinator Bob Shoop files a counterclaim against Penn State, which we talked about that story yesterday. Penn State, the former employer of Bob Shoop, who was brought in to fix Tennessee's defense, and I think did a pretty decent job of doing so and getting players to play at a much higher level, is being sued by Penn State for breach of contract. He left his contract early to be hired as the defensive coordinator of Tennessee. He asked the Vols specifically not to buy out his contract, that he would handle that issue, and which is one of the reasons why Tennessee was able to get him, and why I think that they pushed as hard as they did to get him, because they felt like that was a sign that he wanted to be here coaching this team, that he did not force them to buy out his previous contract, even though I don't know, that's what I would have done. That's what I would have done. But regardless, he didn't. And now Penn State is suing him for $900,000 roughly in money he would owe them. And now, apparently, defensive coordinator Bob Shoop has filed a counterclaim to Penn State's breach of contract lawsuit. According to this from Andrew Asselford of SEC Country, earlier in the week, a report surfaced that Penn State was suing Shoop for $891,856 after the coach left the school before the expiration of his contract. Shoop's contract with Penn State required him to pay 50% of his base salary for the final 2 years of his deal, since he did not become a head coach within 1 year of resignation. Shoop has refused to pay the claim. Tennessee's defense ranked number 68 in the nation last year. Shoop's first year with the Vols. He's saying, Shoop is, that is, he is claiming that he was fired. And because he was fired from a, and I quote, hostile, negative work environment, Shoop seeks $75,000 in damages. So he's saying, not only do I not owe you $900,000, you owe me $75,000. I didn't resign, you fired me, which is the reverse of how that quote usually goes. I don't quit, I'm fired. And this is starting to get a little bit tricky. And I don't think it's going to affect Tennessee football at all, but I can't imagine that this is a distraction that helps. Right? Bob Shoop, talented defensive coordinator when he was coaching at Penn State. They were 14th in the nation defensively. Number 68 in the nation for Tennessee. For a guy who coached there for a year is not bad. Who had to deal with some injuries is, again, not bad. I thought that he could have done a whole lot better, I think, with the talent that he had on that roster. But it's not, it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. I just can't imagine that this is a distraction that is particularly useful or helpful in a year where the head coach, look, we don't know what Butch Jones is. Butch Jones could just as likely have a season that gets him fired as a season that reassures everybody. That is the life that you live when people think that you are on average going to win 7 to 8 games. That if Butch Jones could shock everybody and win 9 games again, I think that would go a decent way for him sticking around. But the fact that Butch Jones has been here this long, accomplished what he's accomplished, which is turn this Tennessee football team into something respectable year in and year out, and we're still not certain whether or not we want to keep him. Like, this is just another thing that if you're Butch Jones, do you really want to deal with it? That guys have been gotten rid of as being a distraction, I think, honestly, for a lot less. Now, I think, again, winning cures all ills. If Tennessee comes out, their defense is dominant, the football team is winning, Bob Shoop and the Penn State contract isn't going to be a problem. It's just one of those things where if Tennessee has a down year, like an actually down year, they look bad, everything gets exaggerated. Everything gets blown out of proportion. And this would be one of the first things you would have to mention if you were going to start blowing stuff out of proportion, right? Like if you're going to start looking for reasons why the team is struggling, right? And you're grasping for straws, which very often happens. That's what we do in the media. We try and explain stuff even when we have no explanation. If you were going to be in this particular situation and you're trying to figure out what are we looking for here to explain how the season is going, again, it's not a problem if you're winning. It's not a problem. But if you start to lose, if games that were winnable start to fall apart, and you fall apart on the defensive end, and somehow you find yourself ranked in the 60s again. Because a guy like Bob Shoop that you bring in that, you know, he had a top 10 defense, then he had a top 15 defense in his time at Penn State. You didn't bring him in so you could try and make top 50. You're trying to be a top 20, top 15 defense. And if you can be that, I mean, you can stomp the SEC East. You can choke them out. Even whether or not you figure out this quarterback situation, right? Like the key to Tennessee's season is that the defense has to improve, and it has to improve a lot, which does, a part of that is staying healthy. That does factor in, that does play a part. But let's be honest here. If the defense doesn't perform and the team's not winning, Bob Shoop and this Penn State thing, that's about to be headline number 1, right? We're only talking about this right now because it's the offseason. We'd really rather just be talking about football. But we'll be talking about this during the season, too, if Tennessee's not able to put together some kind of convincing victories. I assure you. Touch with Keon Rose on AM 1240 and 92.7 FM. So Bruce Arians, I read from the article of Pro Football Talk earlier, released a book. The book is called Quarterback Whisperer, and it is officially released next Tuesday. And he has some stories of his time in football, both as a quarterback and as a coach of quarterbacks. And Bruce Arians had some stories about coaching Peyton Manning. One notable story in which Peyton Manning was getting beaten to death in 1998 by the New England Patriots, the pre-Tom Brady, pre-Bill Belichick New England Patriots, might I add, back when they were inside of the same division, about part of the way through the fourth quarter of a game. And Peyton was trying to be taken out of the game. And Bruce Arians said, no, you don't get to leave this game. And I quote Bruce Arians, bleep no, get back in there. We'll go no huddle and maybe you'll learn something. You can never ask to come out. You're our leader. Act like it. And it's funny because I don't know that I ever would have imagined a story about Peyton Manning where Peyton Manning did not want to play. Peyton Manning, throughout my lifetime, is a guy that I grew up as a kid watching Peyton Manning, and I was like an adult by the time Peyton Manning's career was done. Peyton Manning is Mr. Never Miss a Snap, right? Like, I've seen Peyton Manning wave people out of games. I remember one game, the Broncos were winning, I want to say by 20 points or something, and Brock Osweiler wanted to come in the game. He grabbed his helmet, he grabbed everything, and he was ready to come in for Peyton Manning. They were going to pull him out, and Brock Osweiler got ready on the sideline to go, and as he started to come in, Peyton Manning looked Brock Osweiler in his eyes, and I saw this because it was on Sunday Night Football on NBC. He looked Brock Osweiler in his eyes and waved him back to the sideline, at which point Brock Osweiler, a dejected Brock Osweiler, dropped his head and walked back to the sideline because Peyton Manning was not about to come out of this football game. Peyton Manning, for no reason, was about to come out of this football game. And so it's interesting when you look at the different influences that guys have had throughout their career, all along the way, how we get to the point where they are what they are. And we know Peyton Manning as being a particularly great quarterback, but it's interesting to get an insight into at least one of the people that influenced him early on. That Peyton Manning was a guy that would at one point ask to come out of a game and become the person who was not willing to come out of the game. Ever, for any reason. Right? That's crazy. So yeah, Bruce Arians. And Bruce Arians is a really talented football coach and a really talented quarterbacks coach. Sure. He's a guy that's going to be able to run a system, which is, as we hear all the time, very complex, which, in fairness, is a nebulous word that says, you know, crappy quarterbacks can't play in your system. We say complicated and we say complex. I don't even think that most of us know in what ways an offense is complex. And really, a lot of it is the same terminology from team to team. Nothing's changing wildly. What makes an offense complex or not complex is the amount of responsibility that a quarterback has in deciding what the offense does based on different looks that the defense gives him. That basically is just a way of saying, nope, the quarterback's got all the responsibility here. That's it. And Bruce Arians is one of those guys that's got the complex offense and needs a quarterback capable of running that. And so I think that part of having that influence on Peyton Manning, like outside of having the influence of, yeah, you're smart enough to run this complex offense, so I'm going to need you to go ahead and do that. A part of the outside of being the influence of that, being able to influence him in terms of you're always going to play. You always need to show your strength here. You need to be the leader. Like maybe Peyton always had that, but maybe Bruce Arians is also a guy that was hugely influential in that. And I think that this speaks to the greater point of success, which is that nobody does anything without success, that you need people in your life, people that you will meet along the way in order to make it possible for you to succeed. You can't do it by yourself. You just can't. Clutch with Keon Rose on AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nuga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM's news now.
Police in Walker County say a man saw his car being stolen on West Highway 193 in Kensington and did what the police say you're never supposed to do. He gave chase and chased the car all the way from Walker County to St. Elmo. A red Kia Optima joined in and began shooting at the victim with .45 caliber bullets whizzing by. It crashed in St. Elmo. The occupants escaped on foot and the F-150 sped away. The carjacking victim was not hit by any of the bullets. After 2 bodies were dumped in a cemetery in Chattanooga, 2 arrests have been made. William Howard Wright and an unnamed juvenile have both been arrested. The police say they believe they know what the motive for the killing was. A video was posted on Facebook of the victims flashing cash, and the bodies were found with their pockets emptied. New details coming out about a man who was arrested back in May accused of having a bomb in his backpack. Joshua Redden reportedly admitted to having a bomb in his backpack. He claimed he needed it to defend himself against the street gang MS-13. Russell Stroud, Nooga Radio News, now.
In-depth traffic, news, and information. Mornings on Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
Expect fair skies through your nighttime hours. Still on the warm side, lows by morning 70 to 72. First Saturday, may see a quick passing shower or thunder shower for the early afternoon, but not bad. Highs into the upper 80s with more sunshine, dry, and pleasant weather returning Sunday. McBriar Realty is now Real Living Southern Realty, serving the entire tri-state area. Find your dream home now with Real Living Southern Realty. For their complete listings and more, rlsouthernrealty.com. And I'm Storm Team 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Orr on Nooga Radio AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
Hi, this is Eric Pelton. Taxes, accounting, business advice. I've got a neat brochure, 12 ways to improve your business profits. Come on by for a free consultation and we'll give you a copy. E.J. Pelton Company, 332-3339.
I have the best steak selection in town. Name of the business is Don's Meat Shop, and I'm Donnie Raines. Just ask for Donnie. I make over 20 different types of sausages. Most of them are great for grilling. We have the best selection, best quality. We have the hard-to-find items. Don's Meat Shop.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
I'm blowing everything up. We're starting over. I'm doing a new show. I want guys who push it to the middle of the table and go over the top. Take a risk, fail miserably. I'm right, and I'm not wrong, and I'll never back down. Conflict works. Allow it.
It's The Herd with Colin Cowherd. Right here and everywhere. Noon Eastern.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
Clutch with Keon Rose on AM 1240 and 92.7 FM. And it's so weird. It's so weird because I read articles all the time about how the SEC last year was not the best football conference, which I will agree with, by the way, that if you have functioning eyeballs, the SEC was not the best football conference last year. And I think a lot of that has to do with quarterback play. I think that as the quarterbacks in your division go, so do you. If you do not have good signal callers on a lot of your football teams, you're not going to be good. And even inside of the SEC, look at the teams that were good. Look at the teams that overperformed. Look at the teams that underperformed. How were their quarterbacks? Right? I think that Alabama performed amazingly well, but a lot of it had to do with Jalen Hurts, a guy that they changed their offense a lot to suit his playing style, and they became something different and harder to defend. Right? Arkansas, offensively, performs very highly. Austin Allen, he's the truth. Jake Bentley, the Gamecocks find him not really aware that what they had in the guy, and they overperformed. Why? Because they had a great quarterback. They have up and down games from Jacob Eason at Georgia. Georgia's an up and down team, not able to be consistent from game to game. Well, you take the identity of your quarterback. So yeah, the fact that the SEC was not necessarily great last year, I think has everything to do with quarterbacks. And I think next year, the SEC will be a whole lot better because Jacob Eason will be a whole lot better because Jake Bentley will be a whole lot better Because Jalen Hurts will be a whole lot better, right? Like you look at it, even a guy like Danny Etling, who is seen as the most powerfully average quarterback in the SEC, the guy most likely to hold back a good football team. At LSU, they bring in a guy like Matt Canada, and Matt Canada is himself known as a quarterback whisperer and some kind of offensive guru, and has coached at least Penn State to a lot of offensive success. Bringing him in is some kind of attempt to revive their offense, because we always wondered with what was, with Les Miles, that you're Les Miles, you're a very good defensive coach. Why is it that you are not able to win with all of this talent? And if you're Les Miles and you know offensively that you're not a great offensive coach, why don't you ever bring in somebody to help run this offense? Why is that not a thing that you've thought to do? And Ed Orgeron has not waited until we've heard whispers. He just went out and did it. So here it is. I think we should expect a good offense from LSU, right? Because Danny Etling's not a bad quarterback. He's not a good one. Like, he's not going to save your team at all. But if you have a good team already and then Danny Etling plays solid football, then I think that there's a lot to look forward to with regards to how far your team can go. Auburn, Jarrett Stidham. We got Shea Patterson and Nick Fitzgerald. I mean, we've got a lot of talented players in the SEC this year at the quarterback position, guys who are going to be really good for years to come. This idea that the SEC's fallen off, it did, but I wouldn't say it's fallen off. I would say it had a down year for sure. But, I've been getting into investing. I've been trying to figure out the stock market. And what you learn is it's got peaks and valleys, but it mostly goes up, right? So you don't, the moment that you start to see yourself lose money, you don't pull all of your money out. You've got to let it grow. Yeah, it's not, you have up years and down years, right? Like if something is declining, then sure. But has the SEC been declining? The numbers wouldn't say so, no. Did the SEC have a down year? Yeah, the numbers would back that up. Alabama was the SEC last year. Right? That was it. But next year, we're going to see an Auburn that we have to pay attention to. We're going to see an LSU that we have to pay attention to. If Malik Zaire works out of Florida, we're going to have to see a Florida that we have to pay attention to. Georgia, if Jacob Eason makes the leap, and we're going to have to pay attention to them. Suddenly, this becomes a more full, more robust conference, and it's almost all quarterbacks. Clutch with Keon Rose on AM 1240 and 92.7 FM. By the way, I read something earlier today. Let me see if I can pull it up. That Tennessee has been killing the recruiting trail, right? Which I knew they were doing great. But here's how great Tennessee has been doing on the recruiting trail. Let me see if I can grab this here, because I don't want to misquote it. But Tennessee has done amazingly well on the recruiting trail. They are third overall in terms of their recruiting class, behind Miami and Ohio State, and they're first in the SEC. Now, here's my issue with following recruiting, because I say this every year, the day before and the day of National Signing Day. I say this every year. I don't follow recruiting like that. I have no idea whose recruiting class is good up until the very end. And you know what? Neither do you. I feel like you've got to wait for these guys to commit first before you start to realize, before you start to buy into, wow, Tennessee's done such a great job recruiting. And I'm not taking anything away from Tennessee. In fact, this is the thing that I have credited Butch Jones the absolute most with, which is that he is a fantastic recruiter. He is amazing at going into your house, telling you or your mom and dad, I'd like this young man to play for Tennessee, and then somehow, despite all logic and reason, you still go play for Tennessee. All right, Butch Jones is one of the best in the nation at that. Dude's really good. Like, if you have to give credit to Butch for anything, it's that he can field a talented roster. There's no doubt about that. You might have problems with his decision-making as a coach, his decision-making as a public speaker, but you can't question his decision-making as a recruiter. He's able to get it done. Tennessee had a down year last year, but look, when you're number one in the SEC and you're third in the nation, that's pretty darn good. The issue here with the Vols is this. I've seen recruits flip. I've seen recruits flip all the time and way too often to buy into any one concept that Tennessee's got a great recruiting class. Like, I have to see it. Like, I get it. I understand. Right? I have to see it. I have to see it. There's no way for me. I've got to see somebody sign on the dotted line. I've seen recruits flip my whole life. And I don't know how you hold recruits to anything. This is the time when they have the most power. This is the time when they have the most flexibility. Right? And because college football causes you to not have that level of flexibility, once you commit, guys take their time committing. Guys commit and then back off. Right? I've got to see it happen. I have got to see on National Signing Day, I've got to see the commits actually go to the school, actually commit to being a volunteer before I'm like, yeah, no, Tennessee's got it. Can't count those chickens before they've hatched. Can't do it. Crazy stuff has happened. It's still impressive, right? Like, still be happy. Because if Butch Jones could suddenly not recruit, then what the heck is he here for, right? Like, he has to do this. This is almost not something that you're even impressed by on a certain level, because Butch Jones has to come out and recruit, especially after last year. If Butch Jones can't recruit, what on earth does he do? Right? He's not the greatest play caller. We've seen that. How many Tennessee fans have sat down on a Saturday afternoon and tried to figure out why it is that Tennessee appears to be running the same 5 plays? He's not a brilliant play caller. He's not a brilliant crunch time decision maker. He's not a brilliant public speaker. His press conferences where fans start to panic, and then he could reassure the fans that he understands and that he gets them. He doesn't do that. Like, Butch Jones better recruit. Like, I want to give him a lot of credit on one hand for what it is that he's doing, because to bounce back after, not a great recruiting year last year, to be third in the nation, look, like I said, pretty dang good. But at the same time, I'm not entirely enthused, and I'm not entirely impressed with Butch Jones doing the thing that we all knew he was good at. Yeah, you better be recruiting. Otherwise, what the heck is it that you do here? Right? Like last year, if Butch Jones wins the East, then I wouldn't say this. I would not say that, yeah, he better recruit. Because I look at a guy at Oklahoma, the recently retired Bob Stoops, and he's a guy, to me, Bob Stoops and Oklahoma I wouldn't say never, but they didn't always have the best recruiting classes. They didn't always bring in the most talented players. And you would think, oh, Oklahoma's north of Texas. Yeah. Not a lot of people are leaving Texas to go to Oklahoma. Like, Oklahoma struggled recruiting a lot from Texas, in fact, especially early on in Bob Stoops' career, where you could argue he coached his best football. But he won football games. So you never had to ask yourself, oh, well, what does Bob Stoops do here? Win. That's what Bob Stoops does here. But I look at Butch Jones, Butch Jones has to recruit, because if he doesn't recruit, you have legitimate questions as to what purpose it is that you are keeping Butch Jones as the head coach of this football team. Because here's the thing. You could make the solid argument that if Butch Jones continues to recruit very, very well, he is going to bring in the kind of transcendent talent that overcomes average coaching. He's going to eventually bring in the kind of talent on both sides of the ball that give Tennessee a legitimate chance to contend, as long as he recruits well. If he doesn't, you cannot make that argument. And you would, in fact, have to concede that maybe we're just not sure how good Butch Jones is. What do we do with him? What do we do? Right? Because that's where we are with Kevin Sumlin. Kevin Sumlin does not recruit poorly, but he doesn't recruit at a great level either. And he doesn't win. So now you are left holding the bag. You are left asking the legitimate question: what is Kevin Sumlin actually good for? And his athletic director came up to the answer that we don't know. We don't have an answer to that question. Clutch with Keon Rose on AM 1240 and 92.7 FM. Brett Bielema, too. Like, Brett Bielema is a guy, you bring in talent, but you're not winning football games. And at some point, there's a frustration level with the administration, with the fan base, with that. So my legitimate question in the NFL and regarding NFL free agency, which I think about fairly constantly. I like player movement, and while I am a huge fan of college sports does not afford me the kind of player movement discussions that I would like, right? When we have graduate transfers, that gets me happy. That gets me excited. I get pumped over a graduate transfer. Right? Even the thing with Jalen Hurd, where he felt like Tennessee and the offensive coordinators and Butch Jones, they did him dirty and they promised him an offense that they did not ultimately deliver on. I like the idea of a player just sort of moving on, taking their destiny into their own hands and going somewhere else, even if it does mean, yeah, we'll have to sit out of here. I didn't have any problem with what Jalen Hurd did. In fact, I didn't even have a problem with the timing of what it was that he did. But let's be honest. Doesn't happen very often. So I got to talk about the NFL if I want some player movement, because I understand that I've probably drowned everybody in NBA talk. But I wonder why the NFL and its player movement does not function like the NBA. I understand there are fewer players in the NFL that can even demand the kind of flexibility that NBA players demand, because their careers are shorter, because teams are restricted to, well, what do we want to run in this system? Because there just aren't that many players that transcend position in the NFL. I think the wide receiver position is probably the position that is the most mercenary in the NFL, in large part because wide receivers can have longer careers. And because a wide receiver, if he is fast, if he is strong, if he is physical, can fit into any system. Like, there isn't a system in which Des Bryant does not work. Like, there is no system in which Odell Beckham Jr. does not work. If you have an offense that throws the ball, and that's all of them, you would love to have a guy like that. You would love an Adriel Jeremiah Green. Right? You would absolutely love it. There is no system that Megatron doesn't work. So I understand that not every position is equal with this. And we actually see it happen a lot with wide receivers, where wide receivers do sign sometimes 1-2 year deals in an attempt to find themselves on whatever team suits them best, whether it's a quarterback that passes the ball to them and gives them lots of looks, whether it's a place where they can go be the number one receiver, or it's a place where they can go get a ring. When you see what happened with Steve Smith leaving Carolina, going to Baltimore in an attempt, I think, to join a Super Bowl caliber franchise. And also he had a disagreement with the organization. You don't necessarily see this in every position. Players like nose tackles will have trouble doing this. You just don't generate enough of the star power. But it's funny to me because wide receivers fit into every system. But you know who else fits into every system? A quarterback. A quarterback. If a quarterback has enough talent to be considered transcendent, right? You change your system to fit that guy. We don't even worry about the problem. Like if Andrew Luck is available on the open market, you change your system to fit Andrew Luck. Right? If Derek Carr is available on the open market, you change your system to fit Andrew Luck. For goodness sakes, we've got teams bending over backwards at the idea of signing Kirk Cousins. And Kirk Cousins is hardly transcendent. He's pretty good. But that's my point. We're desperate for quarterbacks in the NFL. How come guys in their primes don't do what NBA guys do? Control their own narratives, sign shorter contracts, move around from team to team. Hold your team hostage until they promise to put somebody around you that doesn't stink, whether it's giving you an offensive line, giving you talented wide receivers, replacing your aging tight end, giving you a defense. Because Phillip Rivers could have legitimately have all of those gripes with the San Diego Chargers. Every single one. The Chargers are cheap and have made absolutely no efforts to build the kind of team around him that has a chance to compete for a Super Bowl. And statistically, Phillip Rivers is every bit the Hall of Fame candidate that Eli Manning is, if not better on paper. But Phillip doesn't have any rings because he was not given a team that can go out there and win rings. We've seen what happens when a team gives you weapons, right? Like Matt Ryan is a guy that we all regard as being a pretty good quarterback. But when they gave Matt Ryan weapons, you actually had to consider him for an MVP award, right? Cam Newton is a guy we know is not accurate. We know that's not even part of his game. You give Cam Newton the right weapons, you have to consider him as an MVP candidate. We've never considered Phillip Rivers as an MVP candidate, even though Phillip Rivers is eternally throwing like nearly 40 touchdowns a season, even though Phillip Rivers is consistently throwing over 5,000 yards a season. Like he's consistently doing these things on a team that's going nowhere fast. And I just want to know. And Deion Sanders asked the same thing. How come Phillip Rivers hasn't tried to pull a Kevin Durant? And my question goes even further beyond that. How come more quarterbacks, how come more people with the most star power in this league don't try and pull that? Force the team to either build around you or go somewhere where the team is built. Because we've seen what can happen when you plunk down a quarterback that we thought was washed up and you put him in a system that's good. When you thought Kurt Warner was washed up and then you put him in a system that was good. When you thought Carson Palmer was washed up and then you put him in a system that's good. You see what can happen. We don't even think Phillip Rivers is washed up. So why is he staying with an awful football team? Clutch with Keon Rose on AM 1240 and 92.7 FM. Just thinking out loud here. Remember, folks, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. I'll see you all next week.
Hi, this is Eric Pelton. Taxes, accounting, business advice. I've got